Thank you for making the time to be here with us again. I appreciate that. I know you're pretty busy there. So I just want to introduce yourself a little bit so we know who we are.
Yeah, my name is Wilson Newell. I'm the bankruptcy attorney here at the Reaves law firm, and I'm happy to be here.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you again. I think you're going to have some very valuable information to share with us here. So I think we can go through some of the main questions that we, normally get on the first appointments.
Mhm.
I know you see clients all the time in different cases, different shapes and different things, but we'll just kind of walk a little bit through the main, let's start with maybe the main reasons why somebody would file for bankruptcy.
Well, the main reasons are you facing serious financial hardship, serious financial problems? If so, bankruptcy is a very powerful and effective and organized way to resolve those debts and kind of get you back on track and either set you up for a fresh start or to reorganize your debts that you have. And again, it's a very organized method to get yourself out of maybe a serious jam.
Yeah. So what do you think are the most common one? I mean, I can think of, like mortgage, going late and foreclosure maybe coming up,
Yeah.
or what
I'd
are
say
the
the
main?
common reasons for filing, sorry to step on your toes there, but most people are filing because they've gotten behind on their mortgage. They've gotten behind on their car note. And they're worried about losing either one of those two. They're behind on their apartment rent. They're facing an eviction court date coming up. Maybe they've just got overwhelming amount of debt. They're getting sued, potentially garnished. The calls won't stop. The letters won't stop.
Mm-hmm.
They've had enough. It's become too much. And they come to see me.
So then that's a good question. Then what can bankruptcy do, right? So what are the benefits of that bankruptcy process? What they can get
Well,
out of this?
there are a few different types of bankruptcy, but there's really only two that apply to everyday consumers. That's Chapter 7 and Chapter 13. Chapter 7 is what a lot of people will call a fresh start. It will discharge all dischargeable debts. If you can eliminate it, that debt will be gone away. Chapter 13, again, it allows you time to kind of just push pause and come up with a structured plan and pay your debts down at a fairly reasonable, hopefully very inexpensive plan payment for you for a period of years until everything gets under control and those debts are again either paid off or discharged out and eliminated altogether.
So chapter 7. So what makes somebody file for one or for the other? What will be the deciding factors? How do you choose between one or the other?
Well, that's a good question. If you're behind on your home or if you're behind on your car, Chapter 13 is going to be your only option. If your goal is to keep that house or that car, it just all depends on your goals. Why you would file one over the other. If you don't have a house or a car, or you don't have those issues that would come along with the Chapter 13 or Chapter 7 would be perfect for you. But it just all depends on what we have going on.
So
I hope that
can
answers your question.
Yeah. So can bankruptcy, keep somebody from losing their house and car? And is that
Yeah,
possible?
certainly. You in a Chapter 13, no matter what, you're going to be able to keep your house and your car, even if they're what's called non-exempt. In a Chapter 7, you can potentially still even keep your house and your car, but there are some restrictions and some hurdles you have to jump over to be able to do so. Mainly, you need to be current on those. You need to be current on your house note, current on your car note, and if you are, we can enter into what's known as a reaffirmation agreement with your lender, with your financer, and it's essentially just reaffirming the contract that you originally signed. It essentially, you can discharge all other types of debt in your 7, but you're still subject to this mortgage, still subject to this car note, and you just keep going as always as agreed. But in a 13, you may get a little bit of relief because, say, your car, we might be able to, we'll certainly be able to reduce down your interest rate to what's really known as prime plus risk. And depending on what your interest rate is, we may actually be able to pull it down and make that monthly obligation a little bit more reasonable. Your house note, that's a Chapter 13 bankruptcy really won't mess with. You can't reduce down what you're going to pay overall, your monthly note, what you're behind, what that principal is, but it can certainly give you some relief in your car note, perhaps.
Nice. So if you are in that situation of, can't make the payments on the mortgage, start getting the foreclosure, there's still a hope to renegotiate that. And
If the foreclosure is set for tomorrow, as long as we can get our paperwork in and filed, it doesn't matter. Even if it's set for 10 minutes from before we file, as soon as we submit our paperwork to the court, what's known as the automatic stay goes into place. The automatic stay is what gives bankruptcy its power. It's what prevents all the collection efforts, prevents the foreclosures, the repossessions, the calls, all that stuff. So as soon as we file, the automatic stay goes into place, and we can save your home. We can stop that repossession. In many cases, even if your car has been repossessed, if you get to us quick enough and some conditions are right, we may be able to even get your car back following a repo.
oh, interesting. So that may be a good follow-up here on what are the things that people should do before they file for bankruptcy. Maybe, you know, they're getting late on the payments or things are starting to tighten up. Are there anything that you should be doing before you come to us? Or
Well, certainly before you come to see us, you'd want to probably get your financial documents in order. Try to gather as much of your financial records that you have available, all those collection letters, all those bills and statements, but certainly pay stubs if you're working, Social Security benefit letter if you're on Social Security or disability. If you're still filing taxes, we're going to want to see those recent tax returns, because the court and the trustee are going to want to see those recent tax returns.
mm-hmm.
Before you ultimately file for bankruptcy, we're going to have to take what's called a credit counseling course. The court requires, before you file for bankruptcy, you must take a pre-filing credit counseling course. It'll take you through credit and debt management, budgeting, things like that. It's about a 1-hour course. And again, you have to have that certificate of completion essentially attached to your petition to allow you to file. And the last thing would just be asking a lot of questions. Ask me questions, and that's always the best thing to help you understand, is to make sure that we're all on the same page before we actually do ultimately file your bankruptcy petition and start the process.
So what happens in that first meeting, right? It's just basically you're gonna walk them through their entire kind of financial situation.
Yeah, we're going to do a deep dive into your financial universe. We're going to talk about everything the court's going to want to know. We're going to talk about everything you own, all of your assets, their approximate value. A lot of times, a lot of your stuff we're going to use what the court calls, or the trustee would call, a yard sale value. So we're going to place an approximate value to all of your things, including your house and your car. We'll be able to pull those for you, help you out with that. But we're also going to talk about who your creditors are, your list of creditors, how you got the debt, when you got the debt, what the debt's for. We're going to talk about how much money you make, who you work for, how much you pay in taxes. We're going to talk about all your expenses. How much are you paying MLGW? What's your rent? How much are you spending on gas every month? We're going to make sure at the end of the day, when we file, if you're filing a 13, that your budget, you can afford it, that we're putting you in a situation where the Chapter 13, you're going to have a good chance of success. It's not going to take all of your money at the end of the month. We want to make sure that this is something that you can afford and that it's going to help you. And in our Chapter 7, basically it's going to be the same. It's going to be the same deal. We're going to talk about everything you own. Your exemptions and that exempt property that we talked about earlier becomes a little bit more important in a 7. But we still got to talk about how much money you make, how much money goes out the door, and who we're dealing with here.
Now,
creditor.
You got to bring a good point here, how much money you're making. If you're working and if you get wages and maybe your wages are being garnished by something, is that something you can still revert with a bankruptcy? Can you protect your wages from being garnished?
Yeah. So if you just got served and you've got a court date coming up and they're going to take that judgment against you and they're going to start garnishing you, yes, we can. A filing for bankruptcy will stop that court process. It will stop a garnishment that's already pending and happening. And so if you get that court notice and you've got court next week, if we file before, essentially that court hearing will fall off the docket, and that debt and all of that will be basically dealt with through our bankruptcy process. So yeah, it will stop the garnishment that's still going on. It will prevent the garnishment from happening if you've got that unfortunate court notice in the mail.
Yeah, which is another question. I think you may get, like, do I have to go to court if I file for bankruptcy? Is that something people will go to court?
Well, if you're talking about maybe that eviction court date or that garnishment court date, you're not going to have to go to that. Your filing for bankruptcy will stop that court date. If you do file for bankruptcy, typically there will be at least one court appearance you have to make. It's what's called a meeting of creditors. It's essentially just a meeting. It's a hearing. You're under oath, but it's very informal, and they're just going to review the contents of the contents of your petition, basically the things we just went over. What do you own? How much is it worth? How much money are you making? Who are we dealing with here? And that's going to be a meeting between yourself as the debtor. I will be there as well to help you in front of the trustee or one of the trustee's attorneys. And we'll basically just run down, again, the contents of the petition. They just want to verify everything you said is true and correct. Although it's called a meeting of creditors, there's very likely that it's not very likely that any creditor will be there. It's not, it is called a meeting of creditors, but it's more so an informal meeting between us, our team, the debtor and myself and the trustee.
Mm-hmm. And then so let's say after you file for that bankruptcy, you said a lot of things, fall in place. You start, have some time to rethink your payments and everything. Can you, after you file for bankruptcy, can you still own anything? Can you still, like, if you make an amount of money afterwards or something, is that all go away, or do you keep, No,
you can still own things in bankruptcy. You can, if need be, you could still purchase a car during bankruptcy. It's not recommended, but you can do things like that. You can take on new debt with permission of the court and the trustee. It's not always maybe in your best interest, but you can certainly own things, or you're going to keep your house, you're going to keep your car, you're going to keep all your stuff, essentially, your wages that are not, they're still yours.
Mm-hmm.
Everything you own and everything you make is going to be underneath this, the rubric of the bankruptcy estate. It's going to be owned. It's still by you, but it is property of the bankruptcy estate. The trustee is going to have a lot of oversight. And
I think overall, the idea is not that you just, the idea is not that you file for bankruptcy and then everything you have just becomes in the hands of somebody else. That's not the case. You can still, whatever you own, your wages or your salaries are still yours. You just
you're still going to go on like normal. Not much is going to change for you. Just as long as you make your plan payments under Chapter 13, things are going to go well for you. And the Chapter 7 process is pretty quick anyway. So your life is not going to change too much for you. Just make good financial decisions and you'll get out of the jam.
Awesome. I mean, it's a great note right there. Do you have anything else that you say are like common questions maybe that we didn't cover here on?
Well, while bankruptcy does, it can alleviate most all types of debt, secured and unsecured, or can alleviate all those unsecured debts. It can certainly get things back on track for your secured debts. There are some that it will not touch, it will not eliminate, and that's your student loan debt. Student loans are not dischargeable in bankruptcy. If you file a 7 and you get a 7 discharge, your student loans are going to exist for whatever they are. Okay. In a Chapter 13, they can be provided for in the plan payment. There are a few different ways to set them up, but the student loans aren't going away through the bankruptcy process. It's not going to wipe out child support. If you owe anybody child support, either ongoing or arrears, mm-hmm. Again, your arrears can be dealt with through the bankruptcy process. If they're coming after you, taking your driver's license, taking your passport, any number of things for being behind on child support, you can get relief through a 13, but it's not going to wipe those out. It's not going to wipe out certain tax debt, new income tax debt. It's not going to affect that. You're still going to owe it, but as things get older, your tax debt kind of changes. It changes how it's treated by the bankruptcy court, depending on how old it is. But there are a few debts that bankruptcy will not necessarily just eliminate easily.
Oh, yeah, that's good to know. That makes sense. There's some limits to it. That's important to know.
There are some limits to it.
Yeah, that's important to know. Anything else that we may not haven't covered here yet, or that are common questions?
A lot of people do want to know how it affects your credit score. It certainly will appear on your credit. It does affect your credit. It can stay there for 7 or so years. Now, the impact does lessen over time, and most people who've come into my office and are contemplating bankruptcy, their credit's already not great, we'll say. So sometimes it's best for them to just stop there and start the rebuild. And we can certainly help you and give you good advice on how to rebuild your credit. And again, making good financial decisions will do that. But so it will affect your credit, but it's not the end of the world. It's not the worst thing. It may even be better for you to just start over and again, start the rebuild, get a fresh start.
Yeah, that's good to know as well. That's a very good question there. So it does affect, but.
Can you hear this behind me?
Yeah, it's part of everybody's world right now. It is what it is. No, but it's fine. I don't think we hear it anymore. It's totally fine. I think we covered a lot of it. I think we covered most of the questions I had here that I think are the most common questions that I saw. Is there anything else that we want to?
No, I think we got a good. We answered a lot of questions. We got a lot of good information.
Yeah, awesome.
I think we covered a good bit.
So
And if you set an appointment and you were in my office, obviously we'd get a little bit more individualized into your issues and your problems to see what's best for you.
nope. Awesome. I really appreciate you being open about it and just putting all that information out there. This is information that sometimes if you do a Google research, you can get really overwhelmed by so many different information that you don't really know exactly, what's true, what's not. So this is super helpful. I appreciate that. And we're gonna send this out to everybody. And if they have any other questions, they can submit their questions and maybe we'll ask you again and we'll do another one.
That sounds fun. Let's do it.
Some new questions. So thank you so much. I appreciate the time.
Of course.